There we go. Cool. All right. So I want this interview ideally to be in one thing so I can just upload it. So I'll try not to say too many times. But first of all, and I guess this is probably an inaugural interview with you. And despite knowing you for a really long time, I've always felt there was something intrinsically creepy about me interrogating you about your history, because I'd read a fair bit about it, but I didn't really want to talk about it. So I only really got your stories when they were offered, rather than me going, what's it like working with blah, 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 blah. So, but I feel like this is the time now. I think this is the time to talk to you properly about who you've worked with, and who's blown your mind and why. And just so people can get a flavor for, because I mean, even though I'd not heard of you back in the day, that was just because I'm not one of those people that like forensically goes through every engineer, producer, recording studio. I'd never heard of Rockfield, so there's a lot more about me than about you. But I think for those of you that haven't, out there that haven't heard of Nick Brine, are you able to just like kind of do an introduction as to what you do, what you've done, and we'll go from there. I think that's cool.
Yeah. So I'm predominantly a producer and engineer.
Yes.
Started out at the tender age of 16 at Rockfield, which is 30 years ago now. Grew up in Monmouth, started there as a T-boy at 16, and tape-op and assistant and all that, and progressed into becoming an engineer and producer, and have been ever since. I'm also a musician, songwriter, played in bands. And I've worked.
Your original prior to that was you were a musician in a band as first. That was your first goal, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I was loved my music, loved my rock music, my indie music, anything with guitars, basically. Grew up in a very musical household, music on the go all the time, stealing my older brother's records and learning about what the older lads will listen to. Yeah, and then I was always recording rehearsals and into my 4 tracks and 8 tracks, which were on cassette back then. And so my love of recording, I was always opposite to you. I was always reading the covers to find out where it was recorded, who produced it, who engineered it. So I was always interested in that side of it, and that opportunity came up at Rockfield. And through a friend of mine who was leaving there and thought I'd be really interested in the job, and said, why don't you go for the interview? Went for the mad interview with Kingsley, which I spoke about many times, and this great story of me not even saying anything at my interview and getting the job. He had no idea if I was actually the right person who was supposed to be going for the job. And and started, that was on the Friday, started on the Monday 30 years ago. And then through being in such an amazing place like that, getting to work with top producers, top engineers, top artists, meeting managers, labels, publishers, A&R people, at a time when the business was still very much as it had been, and kind of full of life and like big budgets and real music people kind of working there, legendary music people, not just on the musical side, but on the business side as well. And of course I came along just as Britpop was starting, so it was a great time in music to get involved in a place like Rockfield, which was kind of the mecca for the Britpop bands, really. Everybody went there after the Stone Roses and Oasis, and everybody wanted to go there and record. And so I was lucky to be involved in those sessions. So I got to work on the Stone Roses record and then on 2 Oasis albums. And from there, worked with lots of indie bands, rock bands, from the Verve, Ash, Teenage Fan Club, the Beta Band, loads of cool bands. Coldplay were there, and Stereophonics and Manics. And I've kept going since, and I've always done that, but I've throughout my career I've also dabbled in having independent labels and doing management, artist development for labels, developing masterclasses. So I was the first to run kind of masterclasses at residential studios.
Right.
I've built many studios, so I've been a studio designer. Built one with The Darkness, built one for Gwigsy from Oasis, built a few over, built some college studios, some school studios as well, and currently got 2 studios in Spain, which I put together. And there's a new studio coming out in Brighton, which I was a consultant on as well. Actually, it's going to be a really good studio down in Brighton.
Oh wow!
With Seaside Records. Yeah, so that's what I do, and I've continued. I continue to play as an artist as well at times, but now basically I get my fix from that from playing with various artists that I work with in the studio, such as yourself. I'm getting involved in the arrangements and the playing as well. It's only odd live things since, but it wasn't something that kind of really grabbed me after I finished in the bands that I was in. But I have done a few, a bit in America and a few UK tours and things like that as a session guy, bass player usually, or guitar player.
And drummer.
And drummer now, yeah.
And what about? I mean, I've heard you kind of explain your history, your kind of a potted history of yours, and you rattle off these names that are, what somebody just working with one of those artists would like dine on that for the rest of their lives, really, without being too soft soapy about the whole thing. But I mean, who did you have your first session with as a T-boy?
Sepultura.
Right.
The first day I walked in, it was probably one of the biggest kind of thrash metal bands out there. These crazy Brazilian guys, and the producer was Andy Wallace,
right,
who just mixed Nevermind.
Wow.
And so I knew who he was, and I'd heard of Sepultura. My best mate from school, Stephen Fleetwood, he was a massive fan. So when he found out I was working with them, it was a great summer for him because he got to meet them and hang out and stuff. Yeah, and that was my first band.
And were you pretty cool how old are you? Did you say you were 16 or 17?
Yeah, 16.
I mean, was that kind of like a blessing really that you were so young and you weren't that kind of, I mean, you might have been like fixated with musicians and artists and famous people and all that kind of stuff. I mean, but were you just like mega cool and just T-boying it? And they were, because the thing I've found with the few people I've met that are, famous, if you like, is that they're just really nice, down to earth people. And actually all that worry is often for nothing, really. Yeah.
I mean, I was lucky because they were such a lovely group of people. And Andy Wallace took me under his wing and immediately started kind of mentoring me. And those guys were great. And I guess I had no preconceptions I didn't really know how it happened, how you made a record properly. I'd never been in that situation. I was so young. My head was still filled with my GCSEs, which had just finished on the Friday. And like I was given the responsibility and that to just basically go up pretty quick. Like Kingsley just handed me a set of keys and just says, "Oh, look up, don't lose the keys."
Right.
And Simon Dawson, the engineer from Rockfield, was on the session. And I owe so much to him because he's an amazing guy. My first few sessions at Rockford were with him.
Right.
So he took a lot of time to kind of show me what I should be doing and how to be an assistant, not just to get too far ahead, but how to make a great assistant.
Right.
And yeah, just lucky that after Sepultura came the Stone Roses, and you couldn't have asked for a better.
Stone Roses was your second gig.
Yeah. Jesus. You couldn't have asked for a better group of people than them as well, because obviously, I love them, the band, and such lovely guys. And this session went on for so long, and that was a blessing in disguise. Not for everybody, because it was 14 months, but for me, it meant 14 months where the studio was pretty much empty most of the time.
Yeah.
So, and Simon was brilliant. We had all this spare time sat there. We were either playing football, we were either down the pub, or Simon was in the studio. I was asking him loads of questions. He's saying, you need to read this manual, you need to do this, show me how to edit tape. And they had so much time to show me all of that stuff.
Right.
And then he just said to me, the best way to learn this is to get your band and record.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The band going home on this weekend, or they're gone for a week here. And he'd just say, bring your band in. So we'd go in, and my band would come in. They'd be sat at Rennie's drum kit. They'd be on, John's guitar amps, and we'd be using all the Stone Roses gear. And I'd sit there and record it, kind of muddling my way through it, figuring out how it all worked, this big desk and all this outboard. But it was brilliant because I had to fault find myself. I had to work out the signal pass and and there was no pressure on me because it was my band.
Yeah.
We had loads of time, and then Si would pop in and I'd say, I couldn't get this going, and he'd show me what I'd done wrong or how to do it. And I had that whole 14 months to kind of, progressed really quickly like that. And at the end of it, at that session, I was then engineering. You know, towards the end of that session, actually, when Simon was producing, I got to do a lot more of the engineering side, and then other bands would come in on downtime days, and they'd just say, "Oh, we just use the house guy." But because I was working with the Stone Roses and they were an indie band, they wanted me to do it. And you know, sometimes it was only demos, but I'd be then producing engineering for those bands coming down from Manchester or from Glasgow or from Liverpool.
And did you naturally kind of evolve into being, because you know, production and engineering are two different disciplines, aren't they? Really, did that just feel like a dead natural thing for you to progress into?
Yeah, because I had my band going, and we had several deals. Like we had lots of UK labels after us, and then we signed with Taste Media. They signed us and Muse on the same day, actually, up in the city in Glasgow. And then we worked with lots of producers, and lots of producers came to the shows, and we went into various studios with different producers. But I always found that, I don't know, I just ended up making the records and producing the records. So I kind of fell into producing that way, watching these great producers as well, and thinking, yeah, I can do the production. I'm a songwriter. I understand music. I've always got ideas. And to me, actually, I'm more in the music side than I am in the technical side. I understand the technical aspects of what I'm doing when I'm engineering and why it's happening, but I'm not overly excited about that. I'm excited about making great sounding records and kind of recording and the recording techniques. But actually, for me, it was the production that got me really excited. And then doing that for my own band and realizing, actually, I'm making this sound better than, you know, the other guys were going in with.
Already.
This is what I want to do. And having all that time with my band, and Rockfield giving me so much downtime, and having a record deal at such a young age, and being allowed to go into studios and just build and build. And then what happened was, a lot of bands, say teenage fan club bands like that, they produce themselves, you know, and bands like Thunder, and they don't have any outside influence. They produce themselves. They know what they're doing. They have strong ideas. People like Raymond in Teenage Fan Club, he's an amazing engineer, producer. And so they just wanted an engineer, and you engineer for them, but you become more than that, because you're the kind of go between. And because I always had ideas, and because I always would come up with suggestions, and then you're also the kind of, when there's a bit of a disagreement in the band, or there's, you know, someone's got to make a final decision, then it's nice having that person there. So I would kind of then end up, that progressed into me being a co-producer with the band, and that's what I've always really liked the best.
Right.
Co-production with me and the artist or the band. Me engineering, but me producing, co-producing it with the band, because a lot of the artists I work with have strong ideas and are fantastic musicians and producers themselves, and I think it's great, and I buzz off them and they buzz off me, but there's always someone who can have the final say and an independent opinion on things as well. Did
you, when you were having all that amazing time in, was that in the quad or the coach house, by the way? With
Coach house. I spent all the 90s in the coach house pretty much.
Right.
The odd set up days and things when I'd get called in to set up the room for various producers who hadn't worked there before, on things like the Coldplay, first Coldplay album, things like that. But I was just housed in that coach house studio for the 90s.
It must be so strange to keep going back with all those memories as well. I mean, you must see every kind of disagreement or amazing experience or epiphany or whatever else. I mean, is that all still fairly clear for you? Because despite what the bands were doing, you're quite clean living, weren't you, really? I should have thought about that question before.
I mean, when I was working, we had a good time, don't get me wrong, but I worked with certain, you know, producers and bands that, especially in the 90s, there was a lot more drug taking, a lot more drinking going on. The sessions were a lot longer, the budgets were a lot bigger. So, and we were on tape, so you couldn't just save stuff. If you went over something, it was gone. You edit. So I was always one doing the editing and making sure nothing was being recorded over, and making the copies and being in charge of the tapes and the desk, and because obviously someone's fallen over on the desk and everything gets changed, then it's a problem when it's all analog.
And did Stone Roses ever come in when you were jamming with your band and recording?
Yeah, and we actually played with Manny once. And And I remember Manny doing an interview then after he'd come in with us one weekend. He didn't go home, he just hung about, and he was coming in, he was playing. And they did an interview with NME, and they asked him who's the upcoming bands, and he name checked us as the next big thing in the UK. It was what he said about us. He's a great guy. But when I walk in there, sometimes it feels like yesterday when I walked in there for Stone Roses, and sometimes it feels like so long ago, like a different life. But the room hasn't changed, and the people there haven't changed.
Since the start, yeah, I can imagine.
No, it's so normal to me and so natural to me.
There's certain questions that I think I asked you and Kingsley this question, and I've been dying to ask it you for ages, because as a songwriter, I'm really intrigued about certain experiences that other people have with songwriters, if you like, because we're quite a lonely bunch, really, I think. That certainly from a creative aspect, it's usually kind of nailed in isolation, I guess, is what I'm waffling on about. But I did ask you, and I think Kingsley answered the question, and I didn't really get a sense of fulfillment from the answer, because I think he just took it on himself to answer it. But I mean, with being in that place, with hearing some of those songs for the first time, I mean, and that whoever's watching this will go, oh, why did you pick those, whatever else. But I mean, what was it like hearing Wonderwall for the first time, and like Don't Look Back, can't say it, Don't Look Back Anger. I mean, what was that like to hear it for the first time? I mean,
amazing, because I mean, when you hear something like Wonderwall after Definitely Maybe, I was a massive fan of Definitely Maybe.
Yeah, exactly. So like they already established themselves creatively, haven't they?
What the hell's it? Where's he gone with this? But they were undeniably sing-along anthems that would just get in your head. And as soon as you heard Liam singing on them, you were like, holy shit, this is like mind-blowing. What, just the melodies, the simplicity of the songs, and just how many he came up with. He'd written half the next album as well already. Just so prolific. Yeah, and there's moments, like I always talk about it, and it's a moment in the documentary when he's Liam singing Champagne Supernova, and I can kind of remember that moment, and even when I talk about it, I get shivers now, and
that was the track that did that for you.
Yeah, because we're all mates in the room, and we're all a bit tired because we're all stayed up late. We'll be doing partying. You've got all this emotion of this great album that everyone's making together at this moment in time, and you're all in the room looking at each other, going, this is amazing, and then Kingsley walking in and saying, oh, this is going to sell 10 million because you got 5 or 6 hit singles there, and everyone just going, yeah, we know, it's sold a lot more than that, but just every song he came out with, was no, oh, we're going to struggle to put an album together here. It was plenty of songs for album 2, and then half of album 3 already written. And just hearing Noel with an acoustic, hearing them for the first time, Noel would come in, sit and play them to us, and you're hearing them for the first time. And the man's just hit him and the acoustic guitar is brilliant. Anyway, it's just the connection he has with his voice and the guitar and sound of his voice. And then of course you build the band around, you put Liam on it, and it's just it takes off. But same with the Stone Roses, when you're hearing like that Second Coming, I just love it when you're hearing some of those songs, 10 Story Love Song, and the guitar riffs, and I can still remember hearing songs like that for the first time.
What other ones kind of made you physically,
Well, I mean, there's moments that make me physically. I was a big fan of Thunder as a kid, so I used to go and queue it as a 14-year-old to watch Thunder.
Really?
I was down the front.
Oh wow!
I love my rock music. I love my indie music, anything with guitars in. So I was a big fan of Thunder at the time, and then so years later. Obviously, I've worked with them now since 1996. I'm really good friends, great band, great friends, and I got to do an album with them where they revisited some of those songs from me as a kid on those first, and so being in a room, sitting at the controls, and they're playing those songs and being in control of it, it's just you just went. I was transported back to being a kid straight away, and the goosebumps go in, and you kind of sat there thinking, this is just like the best thing ever.
Best job in the world.
Yeah. So because there's times when it's not, there's times when you're away from family, when it's stressful sessions, and you're working months and months and 100 hours a week, and things aren't going so great, and you might have other personal stuff going on. There's times when it's not the best job, but there's those moments where you just where it becomes the best. It reminds you, it is the best job in the world. But lots of other things.
What was it like working with Teenage Fan Club? Because you talk about Thunder and the history there, but I think when I've asked you before, who's your favorite band of all time, it is
Teenage Fan Club. There's loads of bands, obviously, if we look at the Beatles and all that, but the band that's just stuck with me from the start of their career and all the way through, and just getting to work with them as people, they've just stayed with me as my favorite band. And even and I work with other bands, and when I say, who's your favorite band, like Tim from Ash, he'd say Teenage Fan Club. Worked with the Darkness and became very good friends with them and best mates with Dan, and Dan was like, who's your favorite band? And actually he loved Thunder as well, but his favorite band was also Teenage Fan Club,
right?
And they kept on cropping up, and then getting to work with them. Had such a great time making the Howdy record with them, and then it was like, this band, I just love everything about them. Love the way they record, love them as people, love the
process as well,
love the whole thing. Getting to hear the new songs, you're always excited what they're going to come up with, and there's 3 songwriters in that band, so you'd be like, what Jerry's song is going to be like, what's Norman's song going to be like, what's Raymond's. And getting stuck into them, and I got to remix. I did the best of album as well, so I got the original tapes from their early albums, and got to remix those and doing stuff like that. It's just brilliant. There's songs that you grew up with and reminds you of being an innocent teenager getting into guitar music, and then having those tapes. And there's another time when I was the engineer on the making of Bohemian Rhapsody,
right?
And we got the master tapes, and I got to re-record Roger playing drums over on the master tape, and Brian redoing the guitars. So you've got Freddie's piano and all the backing vocals, and then they're redoing their bits. And then there's guide vocals on there of Freddie, so the different lyrics, and he's humming some of it, and he's speaking in between, and just moments like that, you're like, this is like amazing to be able to sit there and do this, with songs such as Bohemian Rhapsody. But there's definitely moments that stuck with me that when bands come out with a song and you just remember where you were when you heard it and the process of recording it. It's a great feeling.
And as far as kind of seeing that process and seeing them in action, is there anything that's happened that you kind of caught you off guard? You didn't, because you'll obviously more than anybody be familiar with dealing with bands, songwriters, and singer-songwriters and all that kind of stuff. And I guess do you see a kind of a consistency of eccentricity or normality and all that kind of stuff? But was there anybody that you kind of met with that was just really unorthodox that kind of blew your mind, really?
Scott Milligan from Kitten Pyramid. It doesn't get.
That wasn't a leading question. But I mean,
you have some really unorthodox methods, and you almost start backwards sometimes and
try to.
And you have stuff that always. So I'm always surprised at where you're going next, because you might just have a very simple idea, but it always keeps me on my toes. And you're definitely up there with like
the greats. I think for the quote it needs to be, I'm up there with the greats. So
the greats. You are up there with the greats.
Brilliant.
So because it's exciting, because I don't know what's coming next or where we're going to go next, and also you give me the freedom it can go wherever. There's no boundaries as such, it's it's a great situation. Nothing is wrong, nothing is right, nothing is
which I feel like sometimes that's kind of it's almost contrived by setting no boundaries, but at the same time I personally, I don't know how you can keep creating the same sort of album each time. It seems a bit futile, really.
Yeah.
Unless they get better, I suppose. I mean, there is that. But I mean,
it's a great process with you. But like, I mean, I've talked to you about this before. The closest I liken it to is a band called the Beta Band. When you're talking about anything throw you, it's their way of recording, their methods actually threw me, because I was doing constant indie bands, kind of Britpop bands, and you have a certain way you're doing it, and the songs are structured a certain way, and you record it a certain way. And most of the producers and engineers that were coming in were recording it a certain way, and then this band comes along, and all of that is thrown out of the window.
And what was that like? Because I mean, did you? I mean, how old were you when they kind of met them? When did you start working with Beta Band? How old were you?
I guess I was about 24.
Okay, so you'd been around for quite a while.
Yeah.
And what about Beta Band? How big were they when they came to you?
Quite big, because they'd had the 3 EPs, so which was quite successful, because they were featured in the Nick Hornby film.
That High Fidelity one.
High Fidelity, yeah, John Cusack, which is a great film, and they're in that. So that kind of elevated them to this kind of cult status, and from that, the big record deal came, and so I was involved then in the first album that they did with another producer. They came to Rockfield, and then the next they did that album, was quite successful. Then they did another one, and I think they recorded it in different studio, maybe in LA and somewhere else, and then they ended up coming to Rockfield and doing it with me.
Right.
It hadn't worked out for whatever reason. And it was that process, and the way we worked. We would finish a song. We would completely finish a song. So we would start it, and the first day would be getting the arrangements, figuring out where we're going to put the drums. Are they going on the roof? Are they going in the courtyard? Are they going in the cupboard?
Yeah.
Is there going to be 2 drummers on this one?
And
the arrangement of the song. And then the second day was all the production stuff, which was Unorthodox as well, because they would go off into their little stations dotted around the studio, and they'd bring it to me in the central hub in the control room, and they'd all been working on stuff individually, adding to the song. So not really knowing what each other's doing. And then they'd bring it into me, and we'd kind of make it all, everyone's ideas worked. And they're all hearing their ideas for the first time as well. And there's sampling going on. They're playing different instruments. There's loops, there's samples, there's all sorts going on, vocal parts. And then we do the vocals with Steve. And then day 3 would be the mix. Finished, song's done. You don't revisit that. You don't go back into that headspace. And then we'd have a production meeting. We'd clear the studio, and we'd pack down, and we'd decide how are we going to do the next song, because the drums might be in a different room. They might be in a different street, wherever they were. And what kind of sound are we going to go after?
And did you just like completely embrace that new way of working?
Yeah.
Because I mean, a more, I guess, cocky engineer of 6 years or whatever else, no longer, 8 years, sorry. Despite the fact they had got that cult status, in my experience of engineers and producers, is they'll go, well, you're still a bit, wet behind the ears here. This is the way we should be doing it, and then the resistance begins. But you just went,
I loved it. I entertained all their ideas, and then I guess my skill as an engineer was bringing it all together and making it work.
Yeah. Well, that excites you, because that's the credit of the fact that you are a songwriter at your core, isn't it? Really.
Yeah. But they were great at that, and making it work, and painting different kind of landscapes with their music. And we need, if you needed a sound of, I don't know, of a plough, we'll get a plough and drag it across the stones, if that's the idea in your head. So we actually spent a lot of time creating our own samples and creating our own noises, because obviously you couldn't just go Google it back then and just find them. So we'd have to create a lot of sound.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, because you've told me about, I think there was 2 sounds that you created that you felt to mention to me, and one I think was a ball rolling down a pool table and dropping.
Yeah.
And there was another one where you were pushing, I think, was it a full car off the edge of a mountain or something?
It did, yeah. Yeah, that was the next album, which went to another level of creativity. Which was the lost album that Atmospheric.
But the thing about it, that is, and because I often think, oh, what would it be like to have that amount of time and budget or just freedom to be able to I mean, because I could push a car off a mountain, I guess, without it being too expensive, I suppose. But to me, there's nothing more exciting than going into a sample library, pick, like we've done before, you know, we want a roller coaster, we find it, we put it in, we find it works, and then we can move on, and the process is very rapid.
Yeah.
And if I went, actually, we need to go to Rill to record a roller coaster and then spend all of the day doing that,
yeah,
that to me would be like, I don't know whether
I mean, it was just, you know, it was a lot about our plan. So we were driving around, we was in the Highlands, and we saw this, one of them saw this car on the edge of this cliff, and then immediately just went, you know, that
anybody in it was there?
Yeah, you know, so, you know, they just said, you know, that bit in that song where it builds to that massive crescendo, and then it can be like a day in the life with the pianos fall at the end.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Well, he said that would be an amazing ending for the song, is the sound of a car crashing into the waves. There was waves already in that song, and some old barrels on a beach, so we were making beats out of these barrels on a beach, and that became the basis of the song. And then for the end, a big crescendo, it was the car falling off the cliff. So yeah, I'm standing there with two microphones, a portable DAT player at the bottom of a cliff. I mean, waves in the wild Atlantic kind of spinning. I mean, when I'm dead, I'm definitely going to die here. But it's worth it because I'm going to record a car falling off a cliff. So, which is obviously silent for most of it. They're all up there pushing it off the edge, trying to get it going. It's this rust bucket, and I'm down on the rocks. Then you start to think, how far out is it going to go when it? Am I far enough back? I can't go any further back because that's the Atlantic. That's the sea, and the waves are crashing in, and and then I'm just standing with my mics. And he's like, "You ready? Yeah, we go." And then I got it, and we captured it. It was brilliant. So yeah, I had great fun with those guys.
And so that's kind of your beta band experience. And Teenage Fan Club are experimental too, aren't they, with their recording processes and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, they are and they aren't, because they kind of they've got a strong idea. They're such good musicians and a strong idea what they want to do, and they've got great instruments, and they're all great players, great songwriters. But there would always be something that they would, like little techniques or using other instruments, bringing in other things that would make them unique and kind of make them more creative. But they're so creative with their harmonies and their parts as well. Great band to be in the studio with, really good.
And you've worked with Super Furry Animals as well?
Yes, another, they're of that same mold of the beta band, the Teenage Fan Club, the way of work, being creative. Again, great guys. Yeah, I was on Fuzzy Logic.
My favourite album of all time.
Yeah, great band, and really creative, really well put together, those records. Great memories of those times. And then it just, it kept on going, you know, other bands as well, great bands. They're all creative in their own way, but there's other bands who were just in a room, just a great band. You know, the Arctic Monkeys, I set them up live. They were in a circle. I set them up live. They just started playing, and it was just phenomenal. And I don't think they played for 12 months. And they were just,
really?
Yeah, we were doing the pre-production for Humbug for Josh On. And we did that at the Leaders Farm Studios in Norfolk. And they just came for a few weeks, and I was just doing the pre-production with them, and I set them up live, and it just immediately, you're just like, this is such a great band. This is why they're as big as they are. You know, you know the songs, you know the records, but hearing them in a circle playing live, just raw, working on new material, it's just a great band.
And you've kept close to the kind of coalface with what you do. It's not like you've gone, I've done that now, and you still like working with, you know, bands that have never recorded an album before, and
love it,
find their way and that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
I guess the magic still hasn't.
I love it. A band just starting out, kind of mentoring them, helping them along the journey, helping them find their sound and find their feet. I get a massive buzz out of that as well.
Yeah. Well, that's credit to you, because I don't know how many sound engineers that evolved into producers and songwriters still do that. Are there? I mean that does. One of my questions is, how has the industry changed? I mean, people that started at your T-boy level that have then gone on to do other things. Are there many of them? Do you still knock around with them? Are they doing?
Yeah, there's a few. And there's, you know, like the Rockfield regulars, a lot of those guys are still going. The reason they were getting to go to Rockfield as freelancers was because they were really good producers and engineers. And
Right.
that's the reason they're still going that. And they, you know, they've seen the good times in the music business and the hard times in the music business. They've had to get involved in lots of other things. But at the end of the day, they're just really talented people, you know, and they're still going to Rockfield. And they learn off all the greats, like I was learning off those producers who were going to the studios that they worked at and were coming to Rockford. They were learning off those guys. And I think those ones who got in as an assistant in a great studio and learned off the great producers and engineers are still going now, because they learn how to be a great producer and engineer, but also how to act in a studio, how to get on with people. They learn about the business because they met the management, the labels, the A&R. And artist development existed then, so they would be involved in artist development. I think a lot of those are still going. There's producers that, were there and starting out when I was starting out, and they still come back to Rockford now. People like Dave Renger, just amazing producers and engineers.
And what makes a great producer, in your opinion? What kind of aspects do they have to have?
Well, it's different for lots of different reasons, because there's great producers who just get a record made. If you're working with an astronomical star who it's really difficult to get them in the room, they've got issues, the band don't even record in the same studio as each other, then a great producer will find the right people for the right jobs and put the record together and make sure that record gets made somehow. Right. For
practical.
Yeah. You know, and there's other producers who just make such phenomenal sounding records, and there's other producers who get the most out of every band they work with. They really get the most out of them. And getting on with people, bringing things in on budget. So many different aspects to what makes it a great producer.
Was that a crap question? It felt like a crap question.
Yeah, I've worked with producers I thought necessarily weren't great producers. And then I always try to think, well, why are they here? Why have they done that record?
What is it about them? Yeah.
Because I can't see it. And sometimes that's maybe the chemistry wasn't there, or it was the wrong producer with the wrong. I mean, the amount of times I've thought this producer should never be with that band, and it's just fallen apart. And that doesn't mean to say they weren't a great band or a great producer, but it just shouldn't have been together, really. So.
And what do you think makes a great songwriter as well, in your experience? I mean, you've sat and witnessed all of them at it.
Yeah.
What's been the one where you've gone, that's how you do it? That is, they've got the right, ingredients.
Well, when you just hear simplicity and lyrically and musically, and you just go, that just works. And I could never have thought that. So it's saying what you need to say in simplistic terms without it sounding cheesy or without something you've heard 1,000 times before. And just how prolific songwriters, people who can keep churning them out, and there's great songwriters who necessarily weren't the best musicians, and then there's fantastic musicians.
I'm definitely one of those, so you can include me in that. Okay, so I've got one more question for you, and then I've got the veganism thing, but I also don't think I'm going to have enough time. Right. So I think I'm going to do the veganism one in a separate interview, if that's all right with you.
Absolutely fine. Yeah.
But it's a really, I think I've learned a lot from that, so I'm sure other people will. But just what's your, if you had to write down the most amazing memory, something that's happened to you in the journey from being a T-boy to now, what would you pick out as being the single most incredible moment in your career? Yeah,
I mean, I get asked it a lot, and there's loads of great moments because I've worked with so many great bands. I had such a good time with the Darkness Boys. They're such a talented band, talented musicians, fantastic. And obviously I got to build a studio with those guys and got to work with them. So, and they were at the top of their game at the time. And it's an awesome band, and getting to work with Thunder, who I love, but also amazing. There was moments with them when it's just like, find it hard to beat those moments. Just again, Luke's an amazing songwriter. They're all amazing musicians. Danny's an amazing singer. The songs are so good. They're so professional that every time you go in the studio, it's a pleasure. They picked out the Arctic Monkeys moment. They were obviously they still are, but massive at the time. And so being in a room with them in that raw form, and Stone Roses really important because of how important they were, how important that album was, and being able to be there. I kind of knew at that time, I'm in this room and there's only me, there's producer and engineer and this band, and this is going to be a moment in history. And I kind of knew at that young age it was, and I knew that when we did What's the Story as well, and Be Here Now. So yeah, because I think standing there listening to the album playback of What's the Story, Morning Glory is one of those moments you'll never forget, and thinking like, this is, you know, British music history at its finest here. There's the Beatles, then there's kind of this moment now. It's going to then go on for years and years. So that's really stuck, and obviously helped my career, and being involved with that, and then getting to go on and do Be Here Now with him, which was also an amazing experience. Where does it? I could just go on, like the Verve, Sabian. It's just like there's moments with those guys, you just think you're in a room with the Verve and they're playing live at 4 o'clock in the morning, and it's just mind blowing. It's just incredible. There's moments like that. But I suppose the one thing is hard to beat, because as an achievement for me as a young age, like 25, 26, when I was going to New York and getting to work with Bruce Springsteen. Actually, I suppose produced Bruce Springsteen because at that time I was producing the record I was working on that he was singing and playing on. And so he left me to it to kind of, you know, you're producing this record, tell me what you want to do. And I think being at the Hit Factory in New York at that young age with Bruce Springsteen in a studio that contained Michael Jackson, P. Diddy, Elton John, and Bruce Springsteen, and me, this young lad from Wales, trying not to feel out of my depth, but because he was just amazing. He, as a person, he loved Dave Edmunds, so he had an immediate interest in Rockfield. And he said the studio he's always wanted to go for. So he just wanted to talk to me about Rockfield and Dave Edmunds. And of course, I just wanted to question him about everything. And we had a small matter of recording vocals and guitar in there. But the whole experience, and where he took us to eat, and the respect that he had, and the way he was as an artist, the sounds he got, the way he was with me, and just getting to sit with him and chat with him. I think at that age in America, in the Hit Factory, I think to put all those ingredients together, and it just makes for that one moment that it's hard to beat that moment, really.
I can well imagine.
I mean,
it's just ridiculous.
Playing a shopping basket and a fire extinguisher as a drum kit with you, I was going to go with.
I don't want to compete with Bruce Springsteen. That's fine. It's absolutely fine.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, amazing. And because it's one of those studios as an engineer and producer you want to work in. And New York's one of those places you want to go and feel it and breathe it and kind of, you know, and I worked there before anyway, but I think, yeah, that whole experience is hard. It's hard to beat, just to meet one of those true legends. I mean, obviously lots of people work with the classed as legends, but he's up there, and just
a different level, isn't it?
Experience, you know, and seeing the enjoyment of the band I was producing, having Bruce guest on their record, and the buzz, and it was quite a hard album, and to get to the point we were at that time was quite difficult. Actually, there was a lot went on, and there was a lot going on, which you can read about in the book. But so it was a lot of pressure, and then, you know, finally when it was all happening, it was just an amazing experience.
Yeah, one you take to your grave, I'd imagine. Really.
Yeah. There's you know, there's the kids being born. There's your wedding day.
I know, but I'm like that. It's like you do the lists and you think, well, I really should mention those things too. But that's a different thing, isn't it? Really, it's a given. That's a given.
So Bruce Springsteen number 1, Liverpool winning the
Champions League. Your children number 2.
Liverpool Champions League comeback 2005. Kids, and then wedding.
I think I did that bit out, I guess.
Yeah.
But thank you. I think that's really insightful. There's loads more I'd like to talk to you about, but maybe it's another one.
Yeah.
About the process. What advice you give to people that haven't started their journey yet. And also to talk about, because you are still vegan, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah. So we'll do that in our next interview then.
Because we can talk about the plans for the rest, 2022, and
there is all of that. Yeah, so let's make it a two-parter.
Okay.
We've charted your history and your most significant memories.
Yeah.
Was a lot of that stuff? Is there footage about all that stuff happening when you're kind of? Because it was in an age where there wasn't really video cameras even.
No,
much.
I mean, we all say, all of us who were there, is thank God there was no phones around in the 90s.
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course.
Thank God there was no social media around in the 90s, because it would have been carnage, and it just and the 90s wouldn't have been the 90s.
There were cameras. Yeah.
And that's not, you know, making an excuse for stuff that was going on or whatever, but so in a way it's great they weren't, because you would just you could just be free and open. You didn't have to do your social media, you didn't have to worry about someone filming what was going on, or you know, all those things, the pressures of that nowadays. And but also it's really sad that they weren't, because
I think so too.
Those things weren't captured. Like, and at the time when your band becomes big, they don't want to let the cameras in. There's only a few times, I know, like the recent Beatles film, when luckily it was all filmed, but so many other amazing moments that we'll never get to see. Some people have film crew with them the whole time for the whole process, because if that happens, and it's something that people want to see in 30 years time, but generally it's a closed shop. It's the band, the producer, the engineer, that's it. The assistant, maybe, if there's an assistant. And it happens between you guys over what used to be 6 to 12 weeks for a session. And, you know, somebody might turn up to take some photographs on one day. Someone might turn up with a handheld video camera that's over their shoulder or whatever, and you know, run out of tape and battery after 15 minutes, and that's it. And then just go to the pub.
That's a really good segue, because I am about to lose on my battery, and I don't know whether I'll keep it.
Right. Well, I'll see you on part 2.
Yeah. Bless you, Nick. Thank you.
All right. Take care, mate.